On this fifth Sunday in Easter season, our epistle reading is from 1 Peter chapter 2 and verses 4 through 10. I would invite you to listen with fresh ears to what the Spirit might speak into your life today in this reading from 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4. Come to Christ, a living stone, though rejected by mortals, yet chosen and precious in God's sight. And like living stones, let yourselves be built up into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, see, I am laying a stone in Zion, a cornerstone chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. To you then who believe, he is precious. But for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the head of the corner, and a stone that makes them stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they disobey the word as they were destined to do. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of the one who called you out of darkness into God's marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's own people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. May God bless to our understanding this reading from God's holy word, and to God's name be glory and praise. Amen. If I look at you and fail to see the Christ in you, isn't it probably because I'm not really looking at you or Christ, but I'm looking at myself? And even that I'm getting wrong. We spend most of our lives forgetting or failing to see the belovedness in each other and in ourselves. You know, the writer of 1 Peter, I haven't often preached from 1 Peter, but I noticed that he's laying it on a little thick here, isn't he, in this ancient letter. He's calling his humble readers in modern-day Turkey by a whole host of flattering titles. A chosen race, I don't like that at all. A royal priesthood, kind of weird, but I'll take it. A holy nation, oh no, not in 21st century America. Once, he says, you were not a people, but now you are a people, God's own people. And the churches who received this letter in Western Asia Minor would have read it from beginning to end in their church service, and everybody would have sat and listened with rapt attention. Why? Because he's talking about them. Imagine the weavers and the seamstresses and the artisans and the cobblers glancing at each other and thinking, who, us? Did the mailman bring us somebody else's mail again? They don't feel chosen. They don't feel royal. They certainly don't feel holy. They don't feel like God's own. For most of the time, we don't feel like God's own. But they are. And we are. Knowing this about ourselves is so hard. And the world will happily tell us who we are and what we're worth. And we spend years constructing our identities, mostly out of what the world told us about who we are and what we're worth. But love calls us as love sees us, simply as God's own. How much differently would you live your life if you lived it in the endless awareness that you are God's and every person you encounter is God's? Don't you think that by accepting yourself, you will be freed to accept others? In fact, this isn't in the script, but it came up in adult education in Faithful Conversations a few weeks ago. We actually do the passing of the peace after the words of assurance, because once you hear and know that you are one with God and embraced by God and accepted by God, you are free to accept and love yourself and everyone around you. Okay, so I checked my records and I told this story in 2019. I think it's time to tell it again. It's a good one, and it's true. It's going to take me a while to get to it. A few years ago, our family took a trip to Europe. In 2019, I actually think it was. And as I've told you many times, I know a Cameroonian priest there who is now living in Vienna. And he took us to some very interesting and some kind of morbid places. He took us to the royal crypt, where the Habsburg family is buried in Vienna, including the most hapless Habsburg of all, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the guy whose assassination sparked World War I, which sparked World War II. But back in 2011, in 2011, the last crown prince of the Habsburg line died at the age of 98. He was His Imperial and Royal Highness Archduke Otto von Habsburg. And just for one day, little Austria had to pretend to be a great empire, just long enough to bury their last prince. You know, the funeral rites of the Habsburgs are complicated, they're full of pomp and ceremony, but they're not without their beauty. Since time immemorial, the Habsburgs have been buried in the same crypt beneath a monastery, the Capuchin monastery in Vienna, and they're all buried in exactly the same way. After an elaborate funeral mass at the cathedral, there's a burial procession to the doors of the monastery, and the Grand Chamberlain, I can't even imagine this stuff without seeing The Wizard of Oz. The Grand Chamberlain pounds on the church door with a silver-tipped cane 3 times, and a Capuchin monk inside the monastery says, "Who's there?" And then, speaking on the dead man's behalf, the Chamberlain replies, "I am His Imperial and Royal Highness, the Emperor of Austria, Apostolic King of Hungary, King of Bohemia, Dalmatia, Croatia, Slavonia," yes, I'm reading this, "and King of Jerusalem, Archduke of Austria, Grand Duke of Tuscany and Krakow, Duke of Lorraine, Salzburg, Grand Prince of Transylvania." And the list goes on with another 24 names of places. I don't know about you, but many of them I haven't heard of. Places that surely no Habsburg has ruled in over 100 years. It's an awe-inspiring list of credentials. I am the Prince of Trent, the Earl of Hohenheims. Put that in your pipe. Lord of Trieste, and so on. The list is a study in Central European place names, a catalog of all the provinces and cities that the Habsburgs captured or conquered or collected. And when at last the man knocking on the door runs out of lofty titles for the deceased, he falls silent, expecting to be granted entrance for such a distinguished personage. But on the inside of the locked gate, the simple monk replies, "Go away, we don't know you." Again, the Chamberlain knocks 3 times on the door with his silver cane, and again the monk says, "Who is there?" This time the Chamberlain simply says, on behalf of the dead man, "I'm Otto von Habsburg, His Majesty, the Emperor and King." That's how I imagine it, kind of in a pleading voice. And again the monk replies, "Go away, we don't know you." Finally, the Chamberlain knocks a 3rd time, and again the monk asks who is there. It's beginning to feel like a really tedious knock-knock joke. And I think all knock-knock jokes are kind of tedious. I mean, if being the Earl of Hohenheims doesn't get you inside, what will? But this time, the Chamberlain replies simply, "I am Otto, a poor mortal and a sinner." This time the monk says, "Come in," and the great gates of the monastery swing open, and the casket is taken for burial in the family crypt. This is a true and a beautiful story that illustrates a fact. On the day when we return to the earth from which we are formed, nothing really matters, does it? Our titles, our degrees, our money, our power, our intelligence, these things are of no importance at all. When we stand at that door at which we must all stand, they don't mean much. And yet, though all our pomp and all our self-appointed identities fall away, still the names that we probably never bothered to call ourselves are there. They remain. A poor mortal and a sinner, certainly. But more than that, holy, chosen, beloved, God's own. if we could live with the awareness of our holiness, of our belovedness, an awareness of who we really are, how much differently would we live these lives? How much differently would we react to the stuff that goes on around us? How much differently would we drive our cars, for that matter? You know, the recipients of this letter know that they are just day laborers and tradespersons and dirt farmers on the edge of the Roman Empire. When the writer of 1 Peter calls the readers royal and chosen and holy, it seems like he's laying it on a little thick. This is a sort of love language. I knew a man long ago who was always telling his wife of 30 or 40 years that she was the most beautiful woman in the world. You hear that a lot, don't you? It was sweet. Honey, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. I mean, at first, I would have to admit, I kind of looked askance at him when he would say that, because it seemed a little excessive. Sure, say sweet things to your wife, to your spouse, but compliments are best when they're believable. And she was attractive enough. It wasn't that. It was just that, why not tell her something that was really literally true about her? But the man was speaking in a form of a love language. Of course she wasn't Miss America, but she was a sweet, ordinary person, middle-aged with crow's feet. But her husband wasn't talking about physical beauty, or if he was, it was just a small part of something bigger that he's reaching for. There's not a word for the stuff that this husband is trying to say. And so he's using the word beautiful, but it's not quite the word. Love cannot see with objective eyes, can it? As the poet Mary Oliver says, all love is crazy love. That's true. All love is crazy love. It's the only kind you get. Love is never perfectly rational. And so when the man said that his wife was the most beautiful woman in the world, he was referring to something that he saw, but that the world didn't. In fact, it was probably something that she herself didn't even see most of the time. He sees the person who is growing old beside him, putting up with all his stuff, dreaming their dreams together, laughing and crying and surviving. He sees the fact that apart from her, he doesn't even know who he is anymore. It's not about beauty, it's about years of laughter and tears and spats and boredom and forgiveness. It's not about objective beauty, for beauty is never objective, and why should women be measured by beauty anyway? It's about another beauty, far deeper than the world can begin to see, a beauty that even the beloved spends most of their life never seeing, but which is seen by the one who loves her or him or them. All love is crazy love. It alters our vision. This world will gladly tell you who you are and what you're worth, and you, God help you, will probably believe them. We probably believe them most of the time. Another thing this world will tell us to do is to distinguish ourselves, to collect things to brag about, like Habsburgs collecting titles, to be the richest and the smartest and the best in our field. But this world can never see us as love itself sees us. We forever try to shape ourselves in keeping with this world's estimation or vision of who we are, or maybe in defiance of that. Each time we engage in any kind of social interaction, aren't we kind of thinking of the self that we're putting out there? What are we projecting to the world? We're fragmented into so many partial selves, inconsistent selves, our work selves, our online selves, our home selves, our church selves. If you've got both Instagram and Facebook, I bet you're not the same self on both of them. You're slightly different on Instagram from who you are on Facebook. And in all these domains, there are things that we want the world to believe about us. And many of them are things the world told us to believe about ourselves. It's exhausting. It's wearisome. This is why we all need those 2 or 3 people before whom we don't have to put on any show, who just take us as we are. Maybe even not 2 or 3 people, but a whole community of people who just accept us for who we are, where we are, what we are. What if we could just be? Wouldn't that be a relief? What if we could just be and let other people just be? What if we could just rest in the knowledge that we are beloved, royal, holy, and let that be enough? And then do what we can for the life of the world. It's hard to see ourselves as we truly are, for the world around us takes a single glance at us and tells us who we are and what we're worth. You're a woman, stand over there. You're a refugee, we got a camp for you. You're a rich man, oh, there's no rules for you. You can have whatever you want. Not only is the world forever assigning us our roles, but we do it to ourselves, and we do it to the people we love. We forget that who we are is far more complex and much more beautiful than what we see most of the time. Why do we accept these shallow roles that the world prescribes for us? We have a holy identity that is always ours. It was there before we were born, it's there after we die. It is that we belong to God. It's there before we come, and it's there after we go. And all the noise and the drama and the self-importance and the titles and the achievements that we kind of squeeze in between those two places, what do they mean compared to that? Like His Imperial and Royal Highness Archduke Otto von Habsburg, who by all accounts was actually a humble fellow. Like him arriving at the door before which we all come, our best attempts at earning our way in aren't enough. The titles and the glories, the accomplishments we've collected, they all fall short. There's only one identity that is eternally ours, and that is that we are God's own. And everyone you know, and everyone you don't know, is God's own. I am God's own, you are God's own, our enemies are God's own. And the great mystery and meaning of these lives is hidden within the bigger life of God. In God's eyes, you are royal, chosen, holy. Or as the voice said it above the waters at Jesus' baptism, you are my beloved. And then Jesus embraced that belovedness. It took him 40 days in the wilderness to do it. And then he teaches us to embrace the belovedness in ourselves and in each other. The world around you may never see this in you. I probably don't always see it in you. Lord knows you rarely see it in yourself. But you are God's beloved. You were perfectly crafted to be a solution to a part of this world's brokenness, a salve to a bit of this world's pain. When society tries to tell you who you are and what you're worth, or worse, when you try to tell yourself a lesser story about who you are and what you're worth, maybe return to these words in the love language of 1 Peter. Royal, chosen, holy. You don't have to feel like it. You don't have to prove it. You don't have to earn it. You have to do something a lot harder than all of those things. You have to accept it. You have to accept it. And then you go out there into the world and you live as if you know who you are and who everyone else is. Beloved children of God, each of us forgets daily that we are God's own. We forget it and we wander off into the ways of selfishness and despair, and we live our lives mostly just in reaction to the stuff that happens to us rather than living them out of these identities that are ours. Rather than living these lives from the peace and the joy of knowing who we are, God's own. We have each other to remind us of who we are. Because on our own, we're going to forget. We have each other to remind us that the only thing that really matters is that we are God's own. Amen.